Thank you for joining us for this episode of All About PR. I'm your host, Tarunjit Ratan. If you are tuning in for the first time, on this podcast, we speak to experts from the world of PR and communication from across the world and bring you interesting conversations from it. Today, we speak to Mou Chakravorty, communication specialist Deloitte, and a passionate member of WICCI, Public Relations and Digital Marketing Council of India. The council has recently unveiled the first edition of the I-Lead survey in collaboration with Indian Institute of Management, Kozhikode. This survey threw a spotlight on the challenges women face while traversing the leadership ladder in the communication industry. It brought to forefront some facts that were alarming, some that caught them by surprise, and still others that every woman in the industry already knew but never really took the time or the courage to confirm. So let's add more on and know more about the findings of this survey. Before we add her on, a little bit more about her. Mo is a passionate communicator, keen to devise winning communication strategies that help generate measurable business outcomes for brands. With over 15 years in developing business focused content and communications, she is an adept professional with the knack of creating compelling creative campaigns with 360-degree business overview consisting of stakeholder engagement, digital strategies, and thought leadership. Currently with Deloitte, Mo consults senior leadership on the firm's brand strategies, brand protection, and thought leadership in the marketplace, focusing on multiple sectors, including consumer led portfolios and business segments. So let's add her on. Hi, Mo. Thank you so much for coming on our podcast today.
Thank you, Tarun. Glad to be here on this platform, and pleasure is all mine.
Awesome. So before we get started on today's subject, which is a very intriguing one, let's start with your PR journey. How did you get into PR, and what was that moment that made you realize that this is the profession that you want to be in?
Like many people in PR, my journey was quite accidental. It was not something which was determined or thought through. It was something that happened because I shifted my job, which was a full-time IT job in Bangalore. Right. I got married and came to Mumbai. Happened to dabble with a few friends, trying to figure out what I do in life, because at that time I was trying to find out an IT job wasn't landing up properly here in Mumbai. So I was trying to also figure out what else can I do. And one of these friends, she was in Ad Factors at that time. She and I happened to be family friends. So she was the guiding factor. And she said that, look, we've observed you. You write well, you speak very well. And in fact, I was doing some communications work while I was doing my IT job in HP in Bangalore. So she said, I know that you've been doing such things. Would you like to try public relations? And that's how it happened, the first job. But soon after I joined, I did understand that it's a space which I really enjoy, because somewhere storytelling was at the core of what I really wanted to do. And the moment I started delving deeper into PR, and I really saw the impact that it makes, business impact side of things, as I started exploring, that's when the whole passion, the purpose of what I wanted to do really came forward. It was truly the calling, as they say. And then I started breathing and dreaming all about stories. So it was all about stories in different formats. And since then, it's been over 14 years now that I'm practicing and I'm kind of reinventing myself, but I thoroughly enjoy what I do.
Wonderful. I think PR is a very welcoming field in that sense. We don't discriminate from which profession you come in, as long as you come into the profession.
Correct. That's true.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get to WICCI. Why the need to create and join an organization like WICCI?
If you go back and actually try and see the kind of organizations or the community, so to say, that exists today, you would actually find that there is no specific community that addresses challenges for women in communications. So with respect to what we are seeing and how strong this community is, communication is one of the core pillars of business, right? And last 2 years have actually been a wake-up call for many brands to actually consider communication as a core element of the business strategy. So in that sense, we are such an important field, so to say, but there was no dedicated community of sorts which could really address challenges for women in communications. So with that thought, I think the foundation or the whole concept of an organization like WICCI came into the picture. More so because, unlike most professions in communications, you have a fair larger share of women. We have about 34% women in communications compared to an average of 14% if you do a gender mapping. But this particular segment actually stems pretty down when moving towards the leadership side. So it comes down to 11% when people start hitting their mid management level, and surprisingly to only 3% when they are trying to enter the boardrooms. Some of these facts might be so surprising if you think about it. So these are facts which were really eye-opening facts. And I think with that core vision, Kavita Lakhani, who is the president, decided to really pick this piece and really form a community where she brought in about 20 strong communication and marketing leaders together. Each of us bring our individual strength. The concept is so strong that we do not invest a single penny monetary wise, but what we do is to dedicate our time voluntarily. And the time is so precious because we intelligently pick the challenges which are existing in the industry and we try to cater to that. So that was really the thought of why WICCI was formed. I'll take another minute to explain why I feel very fortunate to be part of this community. So, with core vision that I spoke about, I think I can relate my own personal purpose in life. So, there are 2 to 3 big goals that I personally feel very attached to. One of them is to do something about women and children. These are two communities which are often, if I may call, not getting the due respect of what they deserve, because there's no level playing field currently, especially for women if you look into background. So there's a lot to be done in that segment, and especially coming from the core communication industry, it was very, very close to me when I heard and actually observed these facts. Something that was surprising at one end, but at the same time, there was also a keen interest for me to really do something purposeful for the community. So that's where it all began, and I think it's very seamless, strong team together, and we've been able to do quite some good work in the past 7 to 8 months.
Why the iLead survey? I understand there is the statistics that you quoted are quite worrisome. So was that one of the key reasons why the iLead survey was done? What were you trying to achieve via the survey?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. And yes, to go back to where I was talking about some of the facts that I quoted, those were the initial starting discussions that we in the team first started to think of. But the core objective was twofold. One, of course, look into the issues of women in leadership, because, our core purpose was to ensure that, there is progress and a growth path for women. Now, when you think of the growth path, it can be in two parts. One is when women are entering their mid-management level, and that's primarily the part that I told you that the percentage drops from a 34% to 11%, which means many women, when they hit their mid-management level, are binded by family commitments, which could be either a marriage, or it could be a time for them to enter motherhood, or it could be time where a lady is trying to take care of old parents. It could be one of these 2, 3 scenarios, right? So during that time, there is a starking difference of how organizations have created a support system and let them balance work and home. There's a big gap there, and we saw that that's one of the big areas to cater to. The second problem, which was kind of seeding into this problem, the first problem that I quoted, is a deep-rooted mindset problem, which means while they are tackling and progressing in the mid-management level, people who become managers and senior managers, directors and above, there's a whole conflict that happens in terms of policies, in terms of men whom they have been constantly compared. There are some very unspoken biases which organizations have not addressed, and these knowingly or unknowingly are impacting the growth of a woman who's trying to move up in the ladder. So that was another very big problem, which was a mindset problem. And the third problem is when she is trying to grow, there could be numerous skill set issues, right? There could be issues related to her not knowing the kind of newer avenues or newer skill sets that are required. So there's a whole gap of mentoring, upskilling that we saw. So these three areas, the mindset issue, the policy issues, the skill set issue, these were the three areas that we saw as challenges, which led us to think of something where we wanted to investigate what's the status quo. And that's where we thought a survey is a best way to really go deeper, understand where we stand today and where we want to really land. Because for us, it was important to open up a conversation in the industry. We could not
Understood.
think of a change. Yeah, we had to come up with a fact, eventual fact. So that's what we did with ILEAD.
So I'm sure your findings also would have reflected the same biases that you spoke about. Can you identify for us the four major key roadblocks that were highlighted in the survey?
Absolutely. So our first roadblock talks about the biases in the leadership roles, which means there's no clear level play field for a man and a woman who are trying to grow. So when you think of a man growing at a certain rate to a leadership position versus a woman, it seems that equal amount of opportunities are not being given. One,
Right.
the opportunities. Two, it's very surprising if you get to understand this. One is the opportunity, the second is the pay package. So, for the same amount of work, a man and a woman get differently paid. So, that is another very big thing that our survey kind of investigated. So, just to quote some facts, only 39% respondents agreed that their current organization had an equal distribution of women and men in senior leadership positions.
Right.
So now when you flip that, you agree to the fact that 61% of them did not have any clarity. And there was a big question mark on the concept of gender equality at the workplace. So that was our first roadblock in terms of bias in the leadership role, something that we wanted to really cater to. The second is, as I said, a big problem happens when women enter the mid management level and they need a proper support system from the organization that they're working with. Unfortunately, our survey says that there are very, very few organizations, in fact, almost negligible organizations have a proper succession planning. And even the hiring policies seem to be very poor. So, poor hiring policies and succession planning was the second roadblock that we understood from our survey. In fact, 47% of the respondents that we spoke to felt that the organizations need to do a lot more in terms of hiring policies, because most often than not, what happens is when people are trying to come back from their maternity, or let's say a break that they have to take because of a certain reason, there's just so much bias in terms of thinking about things like, maybe if she's a new mother, she will not cater to my accounts in a certain way, or just because she is a woman, she may not be able to cater to a certain sector because maybe she has to get back home at a certain time.
Right.
So these are some things that we kind of understood, that these are biases which are lurking inside the system and something that needs to come out. So that is roadblock number two that we found: hiring policies, succession planning. The third and a very important one is about formal mentoring programs. So as I said, talent and skill set is a very big thing, right? Especially
Correct.
in the digital time frame that we're talking about. I mean, gone are those days when you had a PR or a journalism course and you're up to speed with the industry. You have to be updated every day, every moment, right? So in such times, it's even more important that organizations put together a formal mentoring process inside the organization, and they also encourage women to go and network, join communities like WICCI and get mentorship. What we
Right.
found was very surprising. We found that 37% women, only 37% women have outrightly said that there is a clear gap in their organizations providing upskilling opportunities, which means there seems to be no formal process. I mean, there could be tokenism here and there saying that, yes, we do have a set of programs or a set of e learning for our employees, but there's no formal way of what women need and are getting support from the firms. So that is a very big problem that we are trying to address, mentoring. And the fourth one, which is again something that connects all the past three problems that I spoke about, is about policy gaps. Because policy gaps, if they exist, whether you talk about returning to work or taking a sabbatical or even thinking of work from home, which was not the due course earlier, right? I mean, it is something that's a reality today. But
Right.
when we think of a year or two ago, there would be a big problem to imagine, especially when you think of PR agencies. They would always expect their employees to work full time in office. So even for work from home, there was a big challenge. Of course, now with the changing new normal, a lot of those things will probably get flexible, but we still find that many policies, HR related and non HR related, even when I spoke about the pay parity issue, it ultimately results into a policy level intervention. We saw that there's a big gap that women are facing. And more so in the last 1.5 year when COVID impacted, these policy gaps have even impacted more to women. And it is a time that we really think that policies need to be in place. So that's our fourth roadblock, which is the policy gap. So just to reiterate, first one, bias in leadership roles. Number two, poor hiring policies and succession planning. Number three, lack of formal mentoring programs. And number four, policy gaps upon return to work.
These are very, very relevant roadblocks, and I'm sure you and me both have gone through it at some point or the other. And if these were to be addressed by each and every organization in the industry, I think there would be a drastic shift that can be created. But coming back to the council, while you very articulate manner, you've highlighted the roadblocks. Is there a roadmap that you've also created to help women and organizations help overcome these challenges? Is there a roadmap that you're also providing along with it?
Yes, so we are very fortunate to have women coming from varied industries and different kind of experience levels that we are seeing. So we've got a great mix, Tarun, and you will agree to that when you have diversity in thinking, in experience. Diversity in any form is always something that brings in superb results. So when we got together and we started the whole journey of WICCI, one of the key things that we did was to welcome new ideas. So we catered to these four big problems that I spoke about, and we kind of bucketed them and saw how we could address each and every side of the problem. So the first problem that I spoke about was taking stock of the matter, which is about the issues related to leadership. Now, for that, the first thing was to investigate the problem itself. And we thought nothing better than initiating a survey, because a survey gives you a clear picture of where the industry stands for. But is that only enough? Is it something that will get us to the solution? No, it definitely cannot. So then what do we do next? So what we did was we then broke up different segments catering to different kind of problems. So one of the other things that we are doing along with the survey, and something that helped in fact in the survey, and it will be a continuous exercise that we at the council will do, is to also listen in, because listening and guiding is something that women seem to be very, very keen to. Because when we were even doing our survey, what we realized, Arun, is that there are lots of women who really want to speak to an independent authority. They don't want to open up either at the firm level or maybe to their personal friends or mentors or people whom they are directly linked with. They would like to open up and share their experiences, or maybe take some guidance from an authentic authority or a community which can guide them or maybe show a direction. Because a lot of women do not really want something to be given right in a certain structure. They want to figure out the way they want to do it. But what they need is a guidance or somebody who can just listen in and maybe guide them to a certain direction. So we have a Hear Her council. Within the council, we have a program called Hear Her, which is a email driven listening mode where we welcome women to write to us, and we are there to listen to their problems, help them, and be their acquaintance in terms of guiding them to a certain direction.
So the council apart, I'm sure as a council, as a collective collection of diverse minds together, there is a lot of interesting roadmaps that you've provided, and I'm sure organizations will have a field day if they choose to implement it. But as an individual, what can an individual do to balance the scales in the workplace? Can you shed some light on that?
Sure. So, from an individual support perspective, I think I basically outlined three big things that one can do. Any women leader, since we're talking about change for women, any women leader can possibly take three simplistic steps. One, of course, there has to be an informal support group which needs to be created at workplaces. So I think just being a woman, if I were part of any particular support system that, let's say, my organization creates, it kind of gives me an opportunity to influence at least those 5, 6, 10, 15 women, right? And what that means is I continuously empower them. I let them inculcate the culture of courage, which means if there's a problem, please speak up. Because if you don't speak up, how will people know what problem are you going through? So that's step number one for me. The second is opening up also helps in steering a lot of meaningful conversation. Because when you network, when you come together as a group, whether within the firm or even if you encourage people to go join communities like WICCI, what happens is because you're sharing your experience, they sharing their experience, there are meaningful conversations. And in the exchange of these conversations, you ultimately figure out a solution. It might not be a complete solution, but you at least head to the right direction. My request is first create an informal support system to encourage women to join communities within the organization, outside the organization. And the third is a very relevant one, which is create and bring more men as allies. Because unless you do that, unless you have more and more men stakeholders supporting and really vouching for the change that we need, how will we bring the change? It cannot be just one way. It has to be collaborative with men and women coming together. So once you have created a few champions within your organization, people who really want to mentor, people who want to sponsor, or people who want to at least be part of your community discussions, what happens is there is slowly a collective change that you see. So for me, these are quick three steps that one can take as an immediate individual step towards change.
But what you mentioned could be actually gender agnostic. It could either be a woman or a man. It's perfectly fine for either one of them to implement these three very simple and basic steps.
That's right. I think the need of the hour is not to think about man versus woman, because I think in the age and time that we are together right now, Tarun, and you will agree, I think diversity and inclusion is much beyond man and woman, to be honest. I mean, it is about people coming together and trying to find out a solution, because whether it is a solution at a communications level or at a business level, we need to work together. There could be a collective change together.
Absolutely. And can you also share a few of your personal experiences around these challenges and probably how you got around them?
Absolutely. So going back to the kind of roadblocks that I spoke about, one of the things that is very close to my heart, I think women, any woman for that matter, who enters motherhood would relate, is the whole time period that a woman really transitions from being just a married woman to being a mother. So that time period is actually very sensitive in the sense that one undergoes a complete shift just thinking about the fact that you're about to nurture another human being. There's a lot of mental and physical change that you go through, and you expect that the firm that you're working with kind of provides you that comfort level or support system, as I said, to tackle these big shifts in your life. So fortunately or unfortunately, I would say that I was quite passionate. As I said, I'm really passionate in terms of what I do, and I kept working till about 8 months. And only when I could not travel to work, because those days work from home would not apply, it was very tough, is when I decided that I possibly be operating a couple of months from home, and maybe after my maternity, which was only a strict 2 months at that time when I
Really?
delivered. Yeah, it was only strictly 2 months. And I had no clue what to do. So I had to actually go through something called as unpaid leave, which was totally fine with me. 6 to 7 months after delivery, the firm that I was working with had no clarity as to how they're going to get me included. Couple of months, I got the answer saying that, look, current team that you were working with has gone through changes and we cannot make changes there. A new client might come, so you'll have to wait. I actually gave them much more longer time. I almost waited for good 10 months. But when I did not get a clear answer from that organization, I had to start looking out. Unfortunately, the organization that I got through and entered a new organization promised me a lot. But you know what? The truth is, once we enter and we start working, things change. And while that current organization had promised me that, I could leave by a certain time, because I was a new mother, I will be given some accommodation in terms of not working on weekends. There was nothing stopping them because there were business pressures, there were client servicing pressures. So I think when I go back and think about that time, it was a very, very tough time. I mean, those 3 years after pregnancy, I think I would probably imagine the toughest time in my career, because there was so much aspiration in me that I didn't want to give up my job. I knew that I was moving in the leadership direction. I could not give up the job. I equally felt guilty all the time being a mother. It was very difficult for me to manage. When I think about that time, had there been good policies, had there been flexi systems, or maybe agency leads who could possibly create a framework, a comfortable way of where I could balance home as well as work, things would be very different. And just by looking at my story, now I feel so much for new mothers, for people who are undergoing issues. And hence the whole zeal comes in to bring in some change so that women don't have to go through all these problems. We can never be perfect, but at least we can create some support systems so that the journey becomes a little easier.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think it's because of our experiences that we pour them into kind of policies that we want to make sure the next generation doesn't face this.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
We're running out of time, but I would want to kind of understand two quick things from you. Your life advice for communication professionals to create a winner's path in the industry.
I don't consider myself up there yet, but I think I believe in the mantra of staying foolish, staying hungry. That's my biggest mantra that I follow. I think I advocate that to every communications professional, because somewhere when I go back and think about my initial years, there was a mentor who told me that when you get into PR, remember you have to be like a sponge. You have to keep absorbing. You have to keep listening. You have to keep knowing people. You might not always want to react, but you always need to observe. Something that very deep in me, and I've always followed that mentor. And I think it's worked beautifully for me. So my advice to a communications professional, as much higher as you go, first and foremost, do not leave your humbleness. Do not forget the fact that you have to be on ground, ready to do everything whenever the need comes in. So it's not about just strategy, it is also about execution. That's my first thing to any and everyone. Okay. The second thing is, I highly recommend people to be knowledgeable. So we are in a knowledge driven field, and we cannot forget the fact that knowledge is the only fuel that will get you and let you stand apart from the rest of them, right? So you have to have that as your biggest ammunition in terms of knowing what's happening in the marketplace, what's trending, what's the new thing, what is the most important topicality. Be very knowledge driven, and something that I've always done, and I don't know any other way other than that. That's my point number 2. Be very knowledge driven. Number 3, always think of the community along with you. You can never grow alone, right? So always think about the fact that success is not just about you. The moment you think like that, you're not a leader. Think of the fact that how did you make a difference collectively? The moment you start in that direction, there will be people who will be ready to sacrifice and come forward with you, will go a long way with you. Moment you see and understand the fact that it is about people and not just the processes and the tasks, that's when you bring relationships which last for years and years. So these 3 things are critical, and once you are always hungry, always keen to know more and more, you will also kind of demystify the whole myth that people have about them being experienced and looking down upon others. That's another very big thing that I always advise. I practically implement and try to force myself to do that, where we don't have a distinction between a new age young executive coming and walking and saying that, look, I know something, would you like to learn from me? And have that clear understanding that yes, there might be a new skill set which you might not know. So the moment you open your minds and demystify these myths, which are very deep rooted, traditional in nature, you see a different level of creativity, something that is the core of our profession, right? You cannot be creative unless you open minds, unless you welcome new things in the scheme of
ideas.
Yeah. So that's my quick advice to comms professionals.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think each and every one of them makes a lot of sense, and love to stay hungry, stay foolish bit of it, because I think that hunger for knowledge is what keeps us forward, right? Especially in our industry. I think in any industry for that matter.
Correct. I think staying hungry and staying foolish, meaning staying grounded, is so important, because the best of the communication leaders, if you actually look up to them, very grounded. They've never thought or come up with a certain amount of air. The moment that seeps in, I think you then lose respect. So for me, this is my biggest mantra I'll always live by.
Absolutely, and we hope that that continues and more people join this particular tribe. Thank you so much, Mo, for sharing your insights with us and sharing the results of the survey as well with us. Really appreciate you taking out the time.
Thank you, Tarunji. It was an amazing conversation, and I learned so much from you too. Thank you. Bye.
So that was Mou Chakravorty talking to us about the findings of the iLead survey. A lot of good information and insights that you can use to implement in your own organizations and your own career. Thank you for joining us for this episode of All About PR. Stay tuned for another intriguing conversation in our next episode.